We set traps for 7 straight days, but what finally appeared shocked everyone. After the last net trap setup, I realized something. This wild boar herd had changed. The net traps were no longer effective. They no longer moved in large groups like before, no longer rushed toward baited areas so easily. The tracks were still there, but more scattered, more sparse. And they always stopped just short of the places where I had previously set traps. And that made everything much harder. I needed a different approach. I needed a trap large enough to capture an entire herd quickly and efficiently. The first trap was set up during the day in a clearing deep inside the pine forest. Everything was carefully arranged, discreet enough not to raise suspicion among the boars. As night fell, they began to appear. One by one, they followed the scent of food into the enclosure. And once the entire herd had moved deep enough inside, the trap door suddenly slammed shut in the darkness. The next morning, when I returned to check it, the sounds and movement coming from inside told me the trap had worked exactly as planned. Two more traps were placed directly out in the open fields of the farm, a location that seemed far too obvious. I didn't expect much, since the area had almost no cover at all, but the result was the complete opposite. After just one night, the traps had captured far more wild boars than I anticipated. When I checked them, the scene inside genuinely shocked me. Clearly, the herd had let its guard down in a way I never expected. The fourth trap was placed right along the edge of the pine forest, an area the wild boars frequently pass through. When I came back to inspect it, several black-coated boars were already trapped inside. From a distance, they still moved cautiously, but the closer I got, the more panicked they became. The repeated crashes against the metal frame echoed non-stop, making the entire atmosphere feel more tense than ever. The final trap was placed deep within the dense pine forest, where sunlight barely reached the ground and where the wild boars often moved with little caution. We set the trap directly along an old trail. The signs were still clear. Every detail was adjusted carefully, from the position of the drop gate to the way the bait was scattered so it looked as natural as possible. Once everything was finished, we left, allowing the forest to fall silent again. As night came, the cameras began recording the first movements. Out of the darkness, the wild boars appeared. At first, only a few approached cautiously, moving slowly and constantly sniffing the air. Then gradually, the entire herd gathered inside the trap zone. And once all of them had moved deep enough inside, the gate suddenly slammed shut. The sound shattered the silence of the forest. Instantly, the herd erupted into panic. The boars in front turned around, only to find the exit blocked. The ones behind kept pushing forward, creating complete chaos inside the enclosure. Squeals, violent impacts, and the pounding of hooves crashing into one another echoed non-stop, shaking the entire trap violently. The next morning, when we returned, we could already hear the noise from a distance. And the closer we got, the more agitated the boars became, constantly moving, slamming into the frame, desperately searching for an escape that no longer existed. The tension filled the entire area. After finishing the inspection of all the traps, we began the harvest. Each trap was handled one by one, while the atmosphere remained tense as the wild boars continued reacting violently inside. Guiding them out and loading them onto the trucks was far from simple. It required tight coordination and careful calculation with every movement. From aggressive adults to tightly packed piglets, every animal had to be controlled and transported back to the collection point. And when the final truck finally drove away, I looked back across the trapping grounds and truly understood the scale of this operation. This wasn't just a hunt. It was an entire effort to control a wild boar population far larger than we had originally expected. When everything was finally over, the forest slowly returned to silence, as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew this was only one part of a much longer battle. What we accomplished today was necessary to keep everything under control before things spiral beyond limits once again. In many rural areas of the United States, wild boars are no longer just a potential threat. They have become an urgent problem for agricultural production. They destroy crops, damage infrastructure, and force farmers to constantly find ways to fight back. But what worries wildlife managers the most is not only the scale of destruction, but the incredibly fast way these animals adapt to traditional control methods. Local authorities have decided to adopt a new mindset in wildlife control. Instead of managing one animal at a time, the most effective approach today is managing the entire sound. This method is not about catching more, but about breaking the behavioral structure of the whole group in the shortest amount of time. The key lies in three factors: clearly understanding wild boar movement patterns, attracting them naturally without causing panic, and handling the entire group at the same time instead of individually like before. This approach helps reduce numbers quickly, limits their ability to adapt, and creates long-term effectiveness for farmland. The solution chosen by most Americans is the Jaeger Pro Hog Trap. This trap is considered a more advanced and effective large-scale trapping solution compared to many traditional traps. The Jaeger Pro Trap is set up by installing a panel system surrounding the target area, combined with an automatic gate system to create a clear guided space. The panels are firmly secured and arranged along familiar movement routes to ensure the target moves directly into the trap. The installation is done step by step to make sure the entire trap structure is stable and ready for operation. Unlike manual traps, This entire system is designed for simultaneous trapping, precise, controlled, and remotely managed. After the frame is completed, the gate system and activation mechanism are carefully tested to ensure accurate response when triggered. The gates must close at the same time and fast enough to prevent wild boars from escaping. This testing phase plays an important role in minimizing technical errors and increasing capture efficiency. This type of trap does not rely on force or quick reflexes like older methods. It works based on 3 principles. Instead of creating pressure, the trap is designed as a neutral behavioral zone where the sounder can move, feed, and interact normally over multiple cycles. This allows the system to fully record the behavior of the entire group before making the decision to trigger the trap. Behavior recognition. Instead of activating when one animal appears, the system only makes the decision when the entire sounder has gathered, including the lead sow and the younger pigs, and when they no longer show signs of caution or hesitation. When the right moment arrives, the trap mechanism is activated in an instant, giving the sounder no time to react and no chance to escape. Right before the trap gate closes, everything looks completely normal. The entire sounder lowers their heads to feed, moving slowly, and none of them show any signs of alertness. Then, in just a split second, the trap gate drops all at once, a clean, decisive sound, with no chasing at all. The pigs barely have time to understand what happened before the entire group is already enclosed inside the trap. It is exactly this perfect timing and complete surprise that keeps every individual contained, while other sounders receive no warning signals at all. As a result, future avoidance behavior does not develop. This is the core advantage that older methods struggle to achieve. Not allowing a single animal to escape, carrying the memory of danger, is exactly why this system can be reused for a long time in the same. Immediately after the trap is activated, the top priority is keeping the sounder stable and reducing stress as much as possible. The space is tightly controlled but still well ventilated, and the animals are quickly observed to ensure there are no serious injuries. Transport is carried out using specialized vehicles, moving in a stable and controlled way. In wild boar management, what happens after a successful trap is just as important as the trapping itself, because even one small mistake can turn into a major risk. In the United States, wild boar control is not simply a reaction, it is part of sustainable agricultural management. The principles placed first include following the law, complying with local regulations, prioritizing humane methods, and aiming for long-term protection of crops and ecosystems. When done correctly, not only do farmers benefit, but the natural environment also becomes more balanced. The most effective solution does not lie in rushed action, but in building a strategy that matches the natural behavior of wild boars. When approached correctly, sounder-based control not only protects crops in the short term, but also brings long-term stability to agriculture and the ecosystem. We are members of a wild hog control team in Oklahoma, and at Twin Eagle Ranch, there is no room for mistakes. More than 1,000 hectares of farmland are being destroyed day by day, fields torn apart, irrigation systems shattered, young corn and soybean sprouts wiped out in a single night. This is no longer a small problem. This is a fight for the survival of an entire harvest, and we do not rely on brute force, but on strategy. The screen of the Hawkeye camera we placed beside 3 big pig traps along the forest edge suddenly lit up. The hogs were in position. The bait, rooting juice, a mix of rotten cheese scent and sweet corn, was doing its job. 1:57 a.m. Dark shadows quietly entered the trap zone. No sound, no sign of suspicion. Wait a little longer. One more. Now, I hit the button. The round trap gate slammed shut. Instantly, the silence was ripped apart by the dry clang of metal striking metal. The hogs inside panicked, hurling themselves into the steel frame with such force that the whole area seemed to shake. The chaos lasted for several minutes before they finally realized they were completely trapped. To make sure nothing had gone wrong, we jumped into the Jeep Gladiator that same night and sped down the dirt trails. When the headlights hit the trap, the scene became crystal clear. The entire sounder, including hogs weighing over 200 pounds, had been captured. After the forest edge area had been disturbed, the hogs began shifting toward lower ground. To block their movement, I decided to set 2 additional octagon-style traps near the livestock pens. It was a narrow position directly along the trail they regularly used to reach water. Fresh rooting marks in the soil proved this had become the new hotspot. 9:21 p.m. The screen vibrated with movement. A large group entered. They sniffed, tested every steel bar. The tension weighed on every second. My hand stayed on the trigger button. Not too early, not too late. I held my breath. This is the moment. Press it. The steel frame shook violently. The hogs inside lost all sense of direction, crashing into one another in the darkness while their bodies slammed against the steel mesh. The chaos peaked before they slowly exhausted themselves and were locked in tight. Less than 2 hours later, at 10:50 p.m., the second trap alerted. This group was more cautious, just as they seemed to sense something was wrong. I activated the trap in time. 2 sounders. One night. Full control. Deep in the woods is where the large boars usually hide during the day. There, I used a reinforced box trap built with a specially strengthened steel frame. Through the camera, I watched them circle outside. They inspected everything, moved around again and again. I did not rush. Patience is the only weapon that matters. When the whole group was fully inside the zone, I triggered it. The gate dropped shut. Hogs weighing more than 250 pounds went wild, smashing into the walls of the trap with deafening force. Panic swallowed the entire group until they understood every effort was useless. They had fallen into a trap calculated down to the inch. After the hogs were secured, we handled the site safely and efficiently. The muddy ground after the rain unexpectedly worked in our favor, making it easier to drag the heavy animals thanks to the slick surface. We used a trailer and truck combination to move the load. Once finished, the hogs were divided into two parts. One portion sent to a professional processing facility. The rest donated to local families to prepare as food themselves. Everything ended cleanly, restoring peace to the ranch. This is not a numbers game. This is a battle of minds. Observation, patience, perfect timing. One small mistake, and everything falls apart. But when everything works exactly as planned, we do not just catch wild hogs. We take back the fields. No one on our team thought things would escalate this far. At first, it was just scattered tracks. A small patch of land torn up. A few half-eaten fruits. But within weeks, those marks connected, forming trails, then clear pathways. And that meant one thing. Not just one, but multiple sounders of feral hogs had chosen this place as a feeding ground. If we didn't stop it quickly, it wouldn't just be one crop lost. The farmers could lose the entire season. That afternoon, the traps went in. Not just one location, but multiple points cutting across the hogs' movement routes. And when night fell, everything began. We didn't have to wait long. About 15 minutes after setup, the first group appeared. They moved slowly, big ones, small ones, staying close together, calm, unhurried, like they knew this land by heart. The bait drew them in, heads down, feeding, until bang, the gate dropped. The sound shattered the silence of the night, followed instantly by chaos inside the enclosure. Bodies slamming, circles of panic. That first moment had all of us holding our breath. Before things could even settle, while the pounding of hooves and metal still echoed, another trap just a short distance away. Slam, a second capture, and this time bigger, heavier, a larger group. When confined, they didn't just ram, they pushed together. The steel frame shook, flexed, then snapped back. This is the difference between catching individuals and catching a full group. With enough numbers, the force multiplies. And if your system isn't strong enough, you lose everything. We kept waiting, because we knew the night wasn't over. Right on cue, the thermal camera to the north picked up another group already inside a trap. But look closely, one mature hog stayed outside, watching, smelling, calculating. In cases like this, waiting for a single cautious animal can cost time, and worse, trigger suspicion in the group. We made the call, dropped the gate, click. The ones inside were secured. The outsider escaped. But remember this, no trapping system is ever 100% perfect. The next evening, we were back on watch, because they always return. Around 9:16 p.m., another group. Mixed sizes, more cautious this time, stopping, smelling the ground. A typical response after partial capture: suspicion, but not enough to stay away. And then, the moment they let their guard down, feeding, relaxed, bang, first group of the night, secured. Less than an hour later, another group approached a trap at the forest edge. But this time, something was different. They weren't uniform. Different coat colors, different sizes. This meant multiple smaller groups had merged. And that's the most dangerous scenario, because there's no shared rhythm. Each animal reacts differently. Timing becomes everything. We waited, watched, and then pressed the trigger. The gate dropped. Instant chaos. They charged the steel walls with full force. All that pressure hitting the structure at once. If the frame failed, we don't even want to imagine what would happen next. Almost simultaneously, another trap triggered nearby. This time, we moved in immediately. Flashlights cut through the dark. Inside, the animals surged, running in circles, changing direction, slamming into corners and bouncing back. This wasn't random panic. It was instinct searching for a weak point. That's why we check at night. Not for the count, but for control. The next morning, we made another round. Some traps still held additional animals. They were exhausted, still running, still pushing. But the aggression had faded. Fatigue had taken over. By midday, transport began. Quick, but controlled. Each latch checked again. Each enclosure secured. Then one by one, the traps were moved out of the fields. Clean, efficient, by the book. That marked the end of a multi-day operation to stop crop destruction. For us, this isn't hunting. It's an ongoing battle. Every night, the animals adapt. And if we don't adapt with them, one small mistake is enough to undo everything.
Hip. Shut it. Dang.
I've lived in Columbus, Georgia for more than 20 years, and I never thought there would come a day when I'd have to guard my farm like a battlefield. Everything started with just a few strange tracks in the field. I ignored them until the next morning when the entire crop was torn apart as if a storm had ripped through overnight. Then they came back, not one, but an entire herd of wild hogs. They smashed fences, tore up the soil, and trampled the harvest I'd spent months caring for. And I realized one thing: if I didn't stop them right now, I was going to lose everything. The first traps were set right along the forest edge, where the hogs usually poured out each night. Not placed randomly, not done in haste. Every location was carefully studied, based on the herd's familiar travel routes. But trapping only at the edge was not enough. Deeper inside the forest, more zones began to be secured as well. Transit points, trails, resting spots, feeding grounds, all of it was gradually brought into the control system. A network was taking shape. We split into teams. Each person was given a role. Everything moved quickly. Once the traps were in place, technology entered the operation. Motion sensor cameras were installed. Automatic target recognition systems recorded every animal that appeared. Every movement was tracked. Every time the herd returned, we had data. No more guessing. No more passive reactions. Everything now was under our control. And after a period of monitoring, we kept bait inside while the trapdoors remained open, watching everything through our devices. When the moment came and the whole herd naturally gathered inside to feed, I looked at my father and knew everything was ready. The decisive moment had arrived. Just one button. The enclosed system activated instantly. Escape routes were blocked almost at the same time. No gaps, no way back. Bang! The drop gate slammed shut with incredible speed. Inside, the wild hogs immediately fell in a panic. They scattered, spun in circles, searched every direction for a way out. But every path led to the same ending. A closed circle, no matter how intelligent they were. They gradually lost all sense of direction. Within minutes, the resistance began to fade. No more desperate charges. No more clear attempts to escape. The entire herd was contained inside the trap system. It was over. I looked at my father, and everyone there let out a breath of relief. That same night, reports came in from every other trap we had placed. They had all been triggered, capturing many more targets waiting for their chance to destroy farms and neighborhoods. No one needed to say anything, but everyone understood. After that night, the whole community would finally sleep in peace, no longer fearing their crops would be ruined again. But the most important thing was never the trap. It was the way the community chose to act. The individuals causing the greatest damage were selected first and dealt with through humane, swift, and carefully controlled methods. No chaos, no extremism, just responsible action to avoid unnecessary panic for the animals while bringing real economic relief to local families. This approach was never about wiping them out entirely, but about reducing risk while still respecting ecological balance. And it was true. After that night, silence returned. No more tangled tracks every morning. No more torn-up soil after every dark night. But what truly changed was the way people faced the problem. No more rushed reactions. No more isolated efforts. Instead, observe, understand, then act at the right moment. Because in situations like this, the most important decision is not how fast you act, it is whether you have enough patience to wait for the right time. By daylight, this field may still look normal, but after just one night, by the next morning, the soil has been torn apart in patches, roots ripped upward, empty spaces left behind as if something passed through and swept away every ounce of hard work. What worries them is not only the scale of destruction, but the fact that it returns almost every night, consistent, relentless, and unpredictable. And that is the sign that if no action is taken in time, an entire harvest could disappear. That is exactly why our team is here again, to install traps strong enough and solid enough to hold the line. Without wasting time, we completed the first net trap that same day on the southern edge of the forest. Before long, it gave its first signal. One boar had been caught inside, but instead of staying contained, it reacted violently, charging straight into the netted gate again and again. The mesh stretched tight, shaking wildly with every impact. The decision was made immediately after that. We would not dismantle the old trap, but we would no longer rely on this type of system. At once, on the northern side of the forest, where the terrain was tighter and more enclosed, a different setup was built. A steel door trap, heavier frame, stronger locks, a gravity drop gate that did not depend on tension like netting. It only needed to be strong enough to withstand a direct hit from a herd of wild boars. When everything was ready, we waited in silence for nightfall. The tension in the air was so thick that no one said a word. Then the first movement appeared. The smell of bait quickly drew in the herd. And when the moment came, when every last one had stepped inside, click, the trigger was activated. The gate dropped shut. Inside, several boars reacted instantly. They burst into frantic motion, searching for an escape. But every direction was sealed. Metal rang out in sharp beats. Short, clean, final. We looked at one another. For the first time, the trap had worked exactly as intended. At another point near the forest edge, the reinforced trap set by Tom did not take long to activate either. Though it caught only a few, it would still reduce the damage to this season's crops for the local farmers. Once the trap was sprung, the boars tried to escape by instinct. But that was impossible. They had been fully contained inside the solid structure we had spent so much effort preparing. And did not stop there. Texas is home to more than 3 million feral hogs. So together with landowners, we often place traps like these out in the fields. The trap in this area became another hotspot, stirring up noise at the edge of the woods. When large, powerful boars were found contained inside, it proved one thing clearly. The system was working exactly as we had planned. Every time a trap was triggered, we did not rush to celebrate. But at the very least, everyone felt a little more at ease. The traps continued to be reinforced. We continued the control operation. This time, we were determined to catch every last one, to leave them no chance to damage this area again. Every year, our state of Texas alone suffers around $400, $500 million in economic losses caused by wild hogs. This final night was considered the decisive one. Once again, we took our positions, held our breath, and waited. At the first trap, the herd had grown larger. Not only adults, but smaller ones as well entered the enclosure. The space inside began to tighten. Then, at the perfect moment, the trap let out a chilling clack. Instantly, movement inside became faster, more violent, more desperate. Heavy blows slammed into the steel frame. Metal rang out sharply. Others circled and shoved. The entire trap shook in waves. But this time, just like the night before, not a single one escaped. We kept watching, kept waiting, and then everything reached its peak. A massive herd appeared, not scattered individuals anymore, but a dense, moving flood. They fed greedily on the bait scattered across the ground until BM. The gate crashed down. At once, the trap exploded with noise inside. Feet pounding the dirt, steel bars rattling without pause. And in that moment, we understood more clearly than ever. If the trap system had not been strong enough, everything would have burst apart. The next morning, we did not dismantle the trap right away, because we knew there was still more out there, and we were right. Another large herd had been caught just before dawn. When we walked past, they became even more agitated. Several slammed into the steel frame so hard the entire trap shook repeatedly. And do you know what was inside that cage? The very reason those fields have been destroyed for weeks. As everything gradually came under control, the farm grew quiet again. No more fresh tracks each morning. No more furrows torn open after every night. This was not a hunt. This was the only way to save the harvest. Because once wild boars discover a stable food source, they do not stop on their own. In situations like this, what do you think matters more? A trap strong enough, or the patience to wait for the perfect moment? Leave your thoughts below. When wolves and mountain lions disappear, which species rises to dominate the forests and valleys of Arizona? The answer is wild boars. They push deeper into residential areas, leaving heavy destruction with every step and becoming a direct threat to human safety. This morning's emergency call from a bean farm marked the starting point of this latest control operation. Without wasting a second, we quickly loaded our gear into the pickup truck and hit the gas straight toward the area, calling for help. The damage was exposed right at the edge of the field. A wild boar was trapped inside the agricultural fencing net. Even with its leg tightly pinned and no way to retreat, the animal showed no sign of panic. Instead, it became extremely aggressive, charging wildly and trying to attack anyone who dared step too close. Ordinary farm fencing was never designed to withstand the raw power of an animal like this. Clearly, the farmer's passive barrier method had completely failed. To eliminate this threat for good, we had no choice but to intervene with a professional trapping system. Following the freshly torn up soil from the bean field, leading straight into the open spaces near the forest edge, we quickly identified the herd's main travel route. The trap network was immediately set up based on their feeding habits. The next morning, the sky cleared and sunlight broke through. My heartbeat picked up as I walked closer to the forest edge to check the results from the night before. Inside the first one-way drop gate trap stood a massive boar, nearly 5 feet long, weighing close to 330 pounds, and estimated to be around 6 to 7 years old. The bristles along its back stood up like a warning the moment it saw us. We kept waiting until nightfall. Silence swallowed everything around us. At the exact same trap location from that morning, the scent strategy had worked perfectly, catching the smell of their own kind and the bait. The wild boars slowly moved into the area. One by one, they slipped through the angled one-way drop gate of the steel trap. The mechanism was simple, but brutally effective. Once the gate dropped, every push they made only forced the edge deeper into the ground. No gap, no escape. The moment they realized they were trapped, the entire group exploded into chaos. Heavy muscle slammed violently against steel, creating a brutal chain of metallic crashes. But the reinforced steel frame held firm, and the outcome was sealed within minutes. But we weren't done yet. Holding our breath, we shifted our focus to another trap location. A lone dark figure slowly approached. It confidently stepped all the way inside and began feeding calmly, completely unaware of the deadly mechanism hidden beneath its feet. Just one light touch. The vertical steel door dropped. The sharp metallic slam echoed through the night. Startled, the animal jumped back and rammed hard against the cage wall. It spun violently, growling with rage inside the tight steel space. But the mechanical lock had already snapped shut. There would be no second chance. While we were still watching that animal, the monitoring system signaled another promising alert from a nearby area. At the second one-way drop gate trap, another one had already been caught. Spreading multiple traps along the predicted travel routes that night helped us completely shut down the herd's destruction. As the first light of dawn appeared, it was time for the final and most dangerous part of the operation, safely removing these wild animals from the area. I carefully backed the truck right up to the trap entrance. Using heavy-duty ratchet straps and thick ropes, we tightly secured the transport cage to the trap gate. Moving the boars required extreme patience. The use of electric prodding equipment had to be calculated with absolute precision. At the right moment, one light touch would create enough momentum for the animal to leap forward into the transport cage. At the wrong moment, it would spin back and charge straight into the steel barrier, separating it from the handler. Every movement had to be decisive. No rushing, no hesitation. The entire destructive sounder was successfully removed. The farm stayed peaceful for a while. But silence is never permanent with animals like these. When the cold winds arrive and the ground is covered with dry autumn leaves, we know food becomes scarce, and that scarcity will force them back. But whenever they return, our system will be ready. Catching wild boars has never been about luck. It is detailed calculation, from wind direction to scent control. We will continue holding the line in these forests to keep the area safe. Everything did not begin at farm, but with the survival of the largest freshwater reservoir in Coconino County. The water source, sustaining tens of thousands of people, was being contaminated day by day. The wild boars poured down like a black flood, tearing up the shoreline, churning the muddy bottom, turning the entire lake into a polluted swamp. This was a crisis, and that was when our rapid response team had no choice but to step in. We moved quickly to secure emergency access permits from landowners around the lake. Immediately after came 48 hours of continuous surveillance. We followed tracks pressed deep into the mud, fresh rub marks still visible on pine trunks as high as 3 feet. Once their routes were understood, I began the free baiting phase, spreading feed for days without setting any trap, building habit and trust. And then, when they had completely lowered their guard, I launched the first strike. A smart enclosure trap controlled by smartphone. Every sensor signal was synchronized directly through the cellular network. Nearly 7 p.m., my phone vibrated in my pocket. I opened the app. A herd of black boars stood feeding beneath the bait station. The screen displayed one command. Do you want to close gate? I held my breath. My finger touched yes. The gate dropped instantly. The entire herd was captured in a single moment. 11:27 p.m. We moved on to control another group. But if you look closely, a few clever individuals had stepped back at the exact moment the gate was about to fall. They had learned their first lesson, and from now on, everything would become far more difficult. The remaining group had become extremely cautious. They now avoided any narrow structure completely. I had to manipulate their instincts. Through space itself, at an open clearing near the forest edge, I built a large corral trap, assembled from heavy-duty steel panels. The key was in the design, 2 wide drop gates placed in different directions. Wild boars are naturally suspicious, but an open space with multiple exits can deceive their survival instincts. They believed it was only a natural feeding ground, a place where escape was always possible. And just as predicted, the herd lowered its guard and slowly moved deeper into the center of the trap. The moment had come. I hit the trigger. 2 massive steel gates slammed down at once. Every path of retreat vanished in an instant. Caught without warning, the boars erupted into panic. They scattered wildly, crashing into the mesh walls with sharp, violent sounds. The chaos in the air was enough to tense anyone watching. After the herd was split apart, the most cunning core group drifted to an open grassy slope not far from the reservoir. The trap there was built from multiple sections of reinforced tubular steel fencing, with no roof overhead. From a distance, it looked like nothing more than an ordinary livestock pen from a farm. We spread a heavy layer of corn directly in the center and waited patiently. The signal came through. A herd of more than a dozen wild boars, of every size and color, was packed inside. The golden opportunity had arrived. The release command was triggered remotely. Immediately, the entire frame shook violently under the force of their impact. But the circular-linked structure dispersed the shock perfectly. Not one weak point, not one escape route. After 2 consecutive full herd captures, the main group, destroying the water source, had finally been taken. The operation continued, pushing the survivors deeper into the forest where no electrical grid existed. With no other option, we deployed a corral trap integrated with solar power. Its self-sustaining energy source quietly kept cameras and the automatic feeder running for weeks on end, steady, silent, like an invisible trap. No human scent, no engine noise. The long silence slowly eroded their instincts to be cautious. 8:02 a.m. Under the first sunlight of morning, an entire group of sows led their piglets in, feeding beneath the hopper. The decisive moment. The image recognition system instantly locked onto the target. The gate slammed shut. The animals inside bolted in panic, while a few left outside escaped. Everything happened in a split second. The mission neared its end on the dry plain beside the lake. The giant patented circular trap from Jaeger Pro was deployed like a fortress, determined to capture the last herd and deny them any chance to return and destroy again. The monitoring screen showed a sight that made me stop breathing. A massive herd of wild boars, black as night, was cautiously entering the trap zone. More than a dozen animals stepped one by one past the gate threshold, unaware that danger was waiting above them. Two heavy steel gates crashed down, thanks to the circular design that eliminated every blind corner. The strength of the boars became meaningless. The final mission was complete. The next morning, we drove out in our Ford trucks to each trap site. Moving wild boars from the steel enclosure into transport trailers demanded patience and perfect coordination. Because of their untamed nature, the animals were highly restless, so we used sound cues and portable barriers to guide them safely into the trailer compartments. Once secured, they will be transported to a designated management area, helping protect the water supply and restore balance to the local ecosystem. Controlling invasive wildlife in America is not about brute force alone. It is a battle of intelligence powered by technology. Every trap, every touch on a smartphone screen is the result of careful behavioral study. Only decisiveness and modern innovation can truly protect the peace of farms and the balance of nature. Recently, the fields have no longer been as peaceful as before. By day, everything still looks green and thriving, but after just one night, the soil is torn apart, plants bitten through, an entire corner of the garden turned into a battlefield. Overlapping footprints of all sizes, this isn't one animal, but a whole herd. There was no other choice. We had to act, not to hunt, but to protect the crops, to protect livelihoods. The traps were set the evening before. Bait was placed along their familiar paths. Everything was carefully prepared, and what happened overnight meant that at first light today, our priority was to check the traps. The first cage appeared at the edge of the field. Inside was a small group. We quickly noticed something. Their fur wasn't the same, black, brown, even striped. This wasn't random. It showed that multiple groups had merged, a sign the herd was growing, expanding its range. Yet a few more weeks, and this place would become their permanent feeding ground. Inside the cage, they pressed together, breathing heavily, unable to escape. We moved to another trap. Some of the boars inside reacted violently. They slammed their heads into the steel frame again and again. Others behaved differently, slipping to the side, using their snouts to probe each bar, searching for the smallest gap to break free. This is something many people overlook. Not every animal reacts the same way. The steel bars rattled, echoing sharp metallic clangs. This was no longer feeding behavior. This was survival instinct. In another corner, a smaller trap had also been triggered. Inside was a single adult and a few juveniles. The confined space prevented them from gaining momentum or coordinating like they could in the open. This is the key point. You don't need a large trap. Just the right placement is enough to hold even the strongest animal. The result from last night made one thing clear: the traps worked, not by chance, but through careful calculation, placing traps along movement paths, dividing positions, baiting according to the herd's habits. But we couldn't stop yet. The traps remained. The bait was replenished. Tonight will be the next test. Slam. The trap door dropped shut. Both were caught, thrashing inside. A good sign. The herd was beginning to lose its caution at the first point. Not long after, and another trap set nearby, a different adult appeared, larger, more cautious. It circled, paused, stepped back, then moved forward along the bait trail. The moment it stepped inside, slam, the second trap snapped shut. Chaos erupted inside, with its size and behavior. We assessed it as a dangerous individual, likely a dominant, experienced animal that had been causing repeated damage in the area. The final outcome of the night came at another trap point. Two were already caught inside. They continued to panic, slamming repeatedly against the steel frame. But outside, a few others had already sensed something was wrong. They didn't move in, just a split second of hesitation. Then they turned and bolted, disappearing into the deep forest. The sound faded into the distance, leaving behind a trap still trembling. And this is something we have to accept. No trapping system is 100% effective. The goal is to break the herd, to reduce the destruction they bring to the crops. The next morning, we returned together to check the traps. At one cage, several were still held inside. One kept jumping, throwing its full weight upward. Clang! It tried to smash against the top of the cage, but it was useless, trying to escape, but couldn't. The next steps were carried out quickly and efficiently. We secured the cages, transported all the boars out of the farming area, ensuring they would not return to destroy another night. Everything was done according to proper procedures and legal regulations. The final stage. We proceeded with humane handling in full compliance with legal guidelines. No prolonging, no display, just what had to be done. This is not hunting. This is how farmers protect their crops, protect the work of their own hands. What do you think about this approach? As wild boar damage becomes more severe, what other choices do farmers really have?